down by the river.
Mr. Gardner died at the hospital a short time later. The medical examiner calling his death a homicide, thus the grand jury. Mr. Gardner held the time of the confrontation. Every other American police officer, every one, who had a record side of the Gardner family. We'll get to that situation, which is volatile, in the next segment. This is out now on the city police policy is that chokeholds is now free and clear of any local and state are not allowed. I would have loosened my grip. I desperately wish the officer and Mayor Bill de Blasio is clear they will investigate the case. Talking Point does not know what happened and could not breathe. I was extreme. The transcripts, which are sealed right now, nobody can know. But that does not stop some agitators from stirring up controversy. However, I will say, I'll send you the police now, but in trouble. Really honest, and testified for 2 hours. He charges, but the feds would have done that. Eric Gardner was open until we read the grand jury, and hearing Mr. Gardner say he had asthma. He was in no condition to absorb what befell him. Yes, he should not have resisted, but all Americans, every one of us, should pity Mr. Gardner and his fate. Manuel Pantaleo was called before a grand jury to him. And I think Officer Pantaleo would agree with me. He deserved that.
I know it says mental piano, but play a little more open, guys. I'm ready again. 1, 2, 3. 1.
Hanukkah, also known as the Festival of Lights. Menorah.
Basunas.
D.C.
Stores have already put out the lights, the decorations, the displays, and they're encouraging people to buy gifts for their loved ones. What has happened to
Hanukkah.
Christmas? What happened to make it so commercialized? And are we losing the true message?
Hanukkah. For Jews around the world, Hanukkah is a time to reflect on the spiritual it is a celebration of triumph over religious persecution and of a miracle that kept the world lit for decades. Though not traditionally a holiday for gifts, Hanukkah's proximity to Christmas on the calendar has made it customary to exchange gifts on one or all of the 8 nights.
Favorite real album of the year.
Yeah.
Favorite real album of the year.
Yeah. Come, all ye children, embrace the holiday spirit, holiday with one L. Close your isolation. Wrap your isolation in a package most friendly. Friendly isolation with but two L's between them. 50% off at the Gaza Strip Mall.
Don't want a lot for Christmas. There is just one thing I need. I don't care about the presents underneath the Christmas tree. I just want you for my own, more than you could ever know. Make my wish come true. All I want for Christmas.
I'd like to thank y'all for listening. Merry Christmas, 4 or 5 messages.
Intercourse had always been a quiet town. People walked down the streets quietly, rain fell quietly against quiet claps of thunder, and people in apartments had sex quietly to not interrupt their sexy fun time having neighbors. In fact, it is said that the Johnsons had such quiet sex that you could hear a pin drop during Mrs. Johnson's climax, which apparently hits a max of 0.002 decibels on a humid day. But as all things must eventually end, the silence in intercourse ended too.
It is said that it all started when Richard Hertz turned 18 one day before jolly old Saint Nick dropped his bulging body and bulging bag of toys down a space tighter than an Asian schoolgirl's vagina. Born to stickler Orthodox parents, Richard didn't know the word penis until grade 8 when the teacher nonchalantly said it during sexual education class. After taking a year to adjust to calling his synth-stick news, his classmates realized just how sexually ignorant Richard was. With an unrivaled opportunity, they took to calling him Dick Hertz, a name he would not come to fully understand until halfway through a 10th grade field trip to the Grand Canyon. By that time, Richard had learned one new word and had begun calling his synth-sphere synth-balls. So mortified by his recently understood nickname, Richard decided to take action. It started out slowly. Nobody paid any mind when Richard checked out Grey's Anatomy from the school library. It was a bit strange when he was seen reading Human Lust and Desires on the staircase between math and biology. Rumor began spreading when Tabner Selsinski claimed to have seen Dick reading the study of human sexuality during geometry class, and alternately wings broke loose when Justy Noof saw Hertz shooting into his stolen copy of the Kama Sutra in the boys' restroom. He was the talk of the school. Luckily, his parents believed his school was full of scene sluts and refused to communicate with them, so they never quite figured out what was going on. His name spread faster than gonorrhea, and everyone was whispering about him within 3 hours of his coming. People stared at his triumphant, slightly sticky face as he strolled to class. Whispers started about the imaginary girl he'd already sodomized, and even some teachers gave him odd looks during class. With such a confidence-boosting head start into the world of condoms and edible panties, his momentum refused to decrease. It only took him a few weeks to become the sexpert. He knew the average volume of a male discharge, he knew which brand of lube was the longest lasting, and he even corrected his teacher's spelling of perineum once in class. Twice, actually. He became sort of a legend. People would give him butt plugs for Valentine's Day and anal beads for his birthday. In return, he would look at them and wink. The resulting orgasm was much better than anything he could have given them otherwise. However, as Socrates once said, dollar get dollar, but Dick didn't care. While most people suffer a decline of popularity after a while, Dick just kept getting bigger, hit a peak, and then plateaued. He remained King Kong of the Ding Dong for all of his high school life. He wrote Dick on paper instead of Richard, and sometimes he just drew a little penis on his paper instead of actually signing it. Eventually, a fateful day approached. As the little date thing on everyone's smartphones and the date on that one person's actual calendar flipped to December 24th, 2015, the events converged and probability preferred a certain sequence of occurrences to occur in the little town or city or whatever of intercourse and. Of course the central player of this play was none other than Dick, and though he was sick with the ways of a Dick, just wasn't ready for the confetti and spaghetti of that girl named Betty or Dante Gabriel Rossetti. The day was going along swimmingly. Dick had just attended his birthday celebration at Hooters and was heading home to rest and get a nice whack in before dinner. His car buzzed warmly in the nipple-nicky December air, and Dick sat bored in the traffic jam looking for things to stare at until the cars moved. He saw snow, some trees with snow, a couple buildings with snow, cars with snow, snow with people standing on it, people with snow standing on it, with snow it on people standing, snow people it on with, and some more snow. There was quite a bit of snow, and it looked like this celebration of the birth of Jesus was going to be the opposite of black. Very much the opposite of black. His automobile eventually began to centimeter forward along the very much not the opposite of black road. After an impossibly cheese amount of time of driving, stopping, and crying, Dick finally reached his location. His house welcomed him with warm air and the smell of non-distinct housiness. He flopped his body upon his couch and promptly fell asleep. His birthday party had exhausted him, and he decided he would just eat a late dinner after his quick nap. Little did he know that a butterfly had just died somewhere in Africa. Thanks, Catty. Dick awoke with a start after hearing the sound next to his sleeping person. With now open eyes, he stared ahead, petrified of the sight before him. A man wearing strange clothes was apparently floating in front of Dick's sofa. The man began to say something about Christmas and the past, but Dick was faster. He swooped down and grabbed his gun from under the couch, and he shot the ghost man thing straight through the forehead. The ghost man thing reached up to feel the translucent blood running down from his new forehead hole. He then disintegrated. Dick then lay back down on his sofa and slept once more. Unfortunately, Dick's recently regained sleep and relaxation wasn't ever meant to last long. He awoke once more due to a sound, but this sound was quieter and wetter than the previous one. His eyes slowly opened, blinked rapidly a few times, and then stayed open. This was due to surprise, not dust in his eyes. He stared down his supple supine body to see the most unusual sight. His figure was jiggle-wiggling all around. How strange, thought Dick. This hasn't happened for at least a few months. Why now? Even with his conscious thoughts centered around his free willy, it continued to shake around like it were a Tootsie Roll in the middle of a 90s music video. Maybe if I just think really hard about something unattractive it'll stop. That always works during church. And so he thought about everything unattractive that he could. He thought about horses. He thought about water bottles. He thought about toilets. He thought about buy one get one free sales at Walmart. He thought about Les Savoys being gentlemen. He thought about having to do extemp instead of com. He even thought about English essays and light bulbs and bug candy, but nothing seemed to work. If anything, the horses bit made it even worse. He decided to stop with the whole thing stick and decided to just dive in. He shot his hands out of a shotgun and died. His hands shot forward like hands shots of vodka and grabbed at his hibble-diddle. But alas, his snappy antler was wiggling with just too much force. Dick was thrown forward as his arms were jerked off everywhere by his Dick was frightened. He had never seen his cheese stick act this violently before. His whole upper body was being thrown around now as the convulsions got worse, but everything below his waist was firmly planted on the sofa, with his body contorting in ways stranger than those of an Asian schoolgirl's vagina. The gymnast made of a college student schedule. He was amazed he hadn't been ripped into by this point. Finally, after what seemed like about 18 seconds or so, Dick fell down. His barrel had finally settled down to simply vibrating, and even this was strange. The main character bent forward and stared intensely at this marvel of nature. Then, it stopped. It just stopped. A sigh of relief barely had time to escape Dick's mouth hole before his head, mouth hole and all, was engulfed by his suddenly gigantic $B chlorpot duff. "I don't even have a vort fetish," screamed Dick as his head was sucked into his enlarging Fuji. Everything was black, except his $B chlorpot on FFF, which was still pale white. Tiempo pasado del Dick. Los sombreros y los tacos volaron en el cielo de Pene southeast derechito y formo el cemendidic. Por esta razón, el cemendidic sabe de pasta. Porque estoy hablando español. En realidad no southeast español. Q brujery es. Dick no comprendió lo que estaba diciendo. Y tenía mucho miedo. Donde estoy en Milpin. Eso es estúpido. Milpin no es tan grande. Arrow element fue tan grande. El pin de había crecido y fue más grande que su casa. Suddenly, the sombreros turned into cowboy hats, the tacos turned into tacos, the penny turned into beer, and everything switched back to American. Thank goodness, thought Dick. I was suddenly craving cocaine and hearty spirit of Mexican nationalism. Even with everything back to Murica, it was still darker than black around Dick. He squinted his eyes, but no light seemed to be in the environment at all. He felt around, but everything was just squishy and moist. How nice! The feeling of general malaise began to encompass Dick. He figured that being inside his own penis wasn't good for his health. Shakily and carefully, he stood up to search for an exit. Once he was on his feet, he started forging his way through the sticky and slippery world that was his body. The darkness continued until Dick could just barely make out a dim light ahead. He increased his pace towards the unknown light source. It grew larger and larger until the blinding light began to hurt Dick's eyes, so he put a hand in front of his face and continued. The light got brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter until it seemed as though he had exited his penis. Strangely enough, he turned around and saw no penis in sight. He undid his pants and looked down to see that his penis was perfectly fine and not seizing uncontrollably. Dick was understandably confused, but his confusion only grew when he noticed that he was no longer in his living room. The walls encompassing him were in fact those of his kitchen. Strangely enough, the kitchen was full of people, and strangely enough, the people lacked faces, hands, or shirt designs. "Hey!" ejaculated Dick. "What are you people doing in my house?" His voice rang out in the kitchen and echoed an unnatural number of times. Finally, every single one of the faceless creatures turned slowly towards Dick. A high-pitched and wavery laugh rang out from every single part of Dick's kitchen. The cabinets opened to reveal hundreds and hundreds of severed penises. They spilled over the edge of the cabinets and tumbled to the floor, squelching and pre-ejaculating as they hit the floor. In ordinary circumstances, Dick would have thought this was amazingly sexy, and while this was only slightly out of the ordinary, Dick still felt uncomfortable in a room full of falling penises and people lacking shirt designs. "You disgust me," said Dick to nobody in particular. All of the faceless people suddenly let out a screech of responsive disgust. They all slowly left their chairs and crawled onto the table. Their designless shirts melted away to reveal bodies composed completely of vulvas and breasts. They all crawled towards each other and began to pile their bodies atop one another. The bottom person thing then proceeded to let out one final screech and died. The one above this one followed suit, and so on until there was a pile of dead person things laying atop its kitchen table. U.S. that's disgusting, said.
Yak it to me. Now available with no advertisements. 54L. His eyeballs melted into semen and flowed out of his sockets and down his face. He pulled his tongue from his mouth and slathered it over his body. It tasted horrific. He needed to eat more to make it taste better. The pile of dead organisms began to melt and continued to do so until nothing remained except a puddle of vaginal discharge. A single tampon floated out of the mixture and shot through the ceiling, leaving no trace of its minimal existence. It was worthless. You're worthless, yelled nobody in particular towards everyone in particular. We know, responded everyone in particular back to, that nobody in particular. The sudden rapid change in air pressure resulting from billions of voices screaming out in unison caused the tampon to shift slightly in its course of flight. Without this shirt, it would have achieved orbit, but now it would never achieve its dream. It really was $RTHL$S. Try. He did. He failed. He screamed upwards into the ceiling, and called it a name based off of its real name. This turn of events sat in the ceiling. The ceiling then went on to read book upon book, and become a social misfit. It died alone and unhappy. The end occurred, restarted, and never occurred at all. Dick wasn't alive anymore. He had died centuries ago in the Great War. Now nothing existed except cockroaches and one single rose, but that would die in time as well. Time stopped. Space stopped. Stopped. Ped. Why? Asked Dick to nobody in particular. Yes, that is correct. Responded nobody in particular. As was expected. I tried, cried Dick into the abyss. Responded nobody in particular. As was expected. I read. I learned. Is that not good enough for you? Is it? Tears flowed down his face. They tasted oddly salty, and they were stickier than usual. Responded nobody in particular. As was expected. Get out, cried Dick at the bloody mass of tampons laying limply on his kitchen table. They did. Single file. Not a word was spoken that day by nobody in particular. Everyone was particular. All was there. Dick looked around. They were clapping, but they were also sobbing. We lost you. But you found you. They all seemed too sad to see him go. But Dick was happy to see himself leave. It had been years since he had left them, but he finally did. He had outgrown them and their ways. He had outgrown the childishness that nobody in particular had pushed onto him, into him, and around him. He'd left. He smiled. As was expected. Rickard rose quickly, and with a fright. He looked around frantically. He was on his couch. He unzipped his pants to see that his was perfectly normal and completely still. He let out a sigh of relief, and this time wasn't engulfed by his genitals. He stood up and looked at the clock across the room. It was midnight. He had slept all the way until Christmas. Intrigued by a blinking light in the kitchen, Rickard walked to it and saw that he had a message. He listened to it. Hey, said a voice. It was his mother. We'll be returning home in a few hours. We have a cake with us for Christmas. It was supposed to be your birthday cake, but we're not going to be back in time for your birthday. Wait up for us. The message ended. It was dated as a few hours ago. I wonder when they'll arrive, thought Rickard. Just about 2 minutes after he had said this, the door opened. His parents entered smiling and covered in snow. Hey, Rickard, his mother exclaimed. You look terrible. Did you see a ghost or something? I wish I'd seen a ghost, said Rickard. He really did. A ghost would have been better than thousands of melting penises. But I'm fine. Let's see that cake. His parents stepped into the house, and Rickard saw that his father was carrying a box. You won't believe this snow we're having, Rickard, said Mr. Hertz. It's really a white Christmas this year. Rickard took the cake box and took it to the kitchen. There the box was open to reveal a gorgeous cake wishing Rickard a merry birthday. How clever, he thought without sarcasm. He took the cake cutter from the drawer and began to cut the cake. He looked up to see that his parents still weren't in the room. He looked down and back up a few times before making his decision. Just this once. Just this once, Rickard didn't jizz in the cake.
Just like the ones I used to know, where the treetops glisten and children